Welcome back to the panel discussion, Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, Discussion of Progress and Next Steps, sponsored by Symantec on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Our guests today are Rod Turk, the Director of the Office of Cybersecurity and Chief Information Security Officer at the Commerce Department, Chuck McGann, the Manager for Corporate Information Security at the U.S. Postal Service, Melinda Rogers, the Justice Department's Chief Information Security Officer, and Ken Durbin, Symantec's Continuous Monitoring Practice Manager. I'm your moderator, Jason Miller. Panel, before break, we just started the conversation about threat intelligence, and I think this is an area that really does hold so much hope from CDM. One of the things that I know GSA and DHS is working on is this dashboard, the idea of bringing all this information to someone like Rod or Melinda or Chuck, and then you guys passing it up the chain to your bosses to say simply, we're in trouble, or, hey, things are actually good today. So let me turn to Rod first. The dashboard, the threat intelligence piece, there's two pieces here. It's the data and the people. What's most important? What's most difficult?
I think threat intelligence is very important, and you know, the data. We're entering in the security world a realm of big data, actually, because when you talk about the number of incidents and events that you get out of your SIM logs, your event manager logs, to be able to pull the needles out of the haystack and be able to make some threat intelligence out of that is going to be key in the future, I believe. But I'd like to take it into this question to a little bit different level, because I think there's also a classified piece that we need to layer into the threat intelligence discussion, because from our Department of Commerce, our Oversight Center, we intend to have a classified feed into what we're looking at, so that if we start seeing some issues in the classified realm, that we can take it and provide unclassified information to our components so that they can be prepared to be able to meet that threat. The interesting part about cybersecurity is that it's not static. The threat's not static. It changes all the time. You know, we often talk about how, you know, when are we going to get the cybersecurity problem solved? I don't think it's ever really going to be solved, because the folks who are perpetrating the malware against us, they're highly technical as well, and they are morphing their technology to meet any kind of roadblocks we may be putting up in front of them. So from a threat intelligence standpoint and being able to get in front of that, I think it's critical. I think it's going to continue into the future, and I don't see an end to it. But I think it's a critical piece that we need to be looking at.
So it's interesting you bring up classified. People don't think of Commerce Department as having really anything that's classified, but you could get something from Melinda that is a classified piece of data. Is that what you're talking about, or maybe you guys do have classified stuff that we just don't know about?
Well, I'm not
maybe you can't talk about it.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about classified things in the Commerce Department, but what is going on in the classified realm that would identify a threat for us, or maybe even a threat for Melinda, or just a threat for the federal government in general. You know, there's lots of different threat vectors. You know, you take a look at Stuxnet, you take a look at the Citibank information. Stuxnet was a nation-state issue. Citibank was credit card information, financial. Then you take a look at RSA's hacking. That was, you know, to the keys of the kingdom for RSA. There are different types of threat vectors, motivations, and intentions. And having an understanding of what those motivations and intentions are for different malware perpetrators, it makes you a better cybersecurity person within your environment to be able to protect against that.
Let me turn to Chuck, because I remember we did a story. When I say we, you spoke at a conference and I was there because I think there was free coffee. But talk about threat intelligence. I think you guys really are ahead of the rest of the government in many ways.
Well, so like I said, we've been doing this for 10 years, and every morning, just to kind of give you a breakdown of it, every morning my folks go back through the last 24 hours of black hat channels, hacker channels, and everything, and we'll take a look. We'll actually filter on USPS, or we'll filter on mail, or we'll filter on some level of term or something that we want to look at, and then we'll match that against our environment or what we believe is our business exposure on that date, given what we found in the chat channels, and we send that information out to the business owners and to the ops folks to say, hey, we need to work on this, or we'll do security vulnerability scans against it. So the threat intelligence for us is not, we're looking at CDM as being an additional vector for us to get that information, so that if Melinda's seeing something, if her cyber guys are seeing something, or if Rod's cyber guys are seeing something, it all goes up into a pot, and we're all able to fish into a pond, and we're all able to pull from that pond to sit there and say, hey, Rod saw this threat yesterday. I'm seeing this threat today. Now, everybody needs to understand that this threat, because we're both .govs, is not going to be unique to us. It's going to come around, and it's going to hit everybody along the way. So I think threat intelligence is not necessarily what you see, it's what the consortium has to see. And I think that's what CDM is attempting to bring to the table, is that ability to mine everybody else's information as well as your own and make the determinations, does that impact your environment or does it not? Is it something you should keep an eye on, or is it something that doesn't play in your space? You don't have that OS, or you don't run that network tool or that firmware version or something like that. So I think it's CDM provides that level. I think that's where we're trying to get to, and I think that's the end state. That's the end goal for us.
You used the analogy pot, and I'm going to go one further stew. So let me turn to Ken and talk about the melting pot of cyber. Where does threat intelligence fit? I mean, is that really the biggest benefit that agencies and other organizations can see from this big effort that DHS is spending? I think somewhere around $180 million on across the government.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a game changer. Symantec's crown jewel is our global information network, and it's the data that we collect from our sensor network, which can come from the products that we have deployed out worldwide, or the honeypots that we have deployed, and other threat sources. And we compile that into a data warehouse, and right now I believe it's north of 175 terabytes. And that threat intelligence feeds our products. So a good example is SEP. SEP is a better product because of Symantec's threat intelligence that is constantly tweaking it. Another advantage of having a pool of threat intelligence like that, we have a follow the sun model where we have SOCs all over the world. So we can see something developing out east, and by the time our customers out west wake up, we've already notified them and said, hey, you got to get ready for this. And I think it's really exciting to think that the federal government is going to do that. I mean, just think of the diverse set of sensors that they currently have deployed and what will be deployed. If you can harness that information and do analysis like Symantec does, it's just a goldmine of information. And I'll say, then you take what they're seeing within their community and you ingest what companies like Symantec are seeing from the outside world, and we need to figure out how to share that data, because I know Symantec would be very interested in the government's data. I think it's going to, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Ken's taking us down that liability thing, which that's a third rail we're not going to touch right now. Melinda.
Jason, I just wanted to add, I think with threat intelligence, it's important to keep in mind there are really two vectors here. One is the external piece, right, that Ken and Chuck and Rod had talked about. The other piece is, to Chuck's point earlier, what the CDM dashboard ultimately should bring to fruition. And today, at least within Justice, we have our own dashboard already developed, but we plan to join the CDM dashboard when it's ready. But the point is, you may not call it threat intelligence today, but it's really a snapshot of your security posture. Where do you stand with your patch status? Even if we can't push the patch out down to the individual offices, where do you stand? How does your configuration look? Do you have out-of-support software in your environment? If so, where are they? So it's really on both layers. There's the internal layer, which we may on a day-to-day basis may not call it threat per se, but it is your security posture, and it could become a vector for the threat actors to come in.
Rod, let me turn to you, because you guys are just at that beginning stages of really starting to really gather that intelligence. From a workforce perspective, are you having to train, hire, change your workforce to understand threat intelligence differently? And if so, are you leaning on contractors for now, or do you have internal folks that you're hiring?
Right now, as we stand up our oversight center, we are hiring a couple of FTEs. We do have some contractors that we're bringing on board to help us with that. And we expect then to ramp up, another 5, maybe 10 FTEs. We're going to be moving our oversight center out to Fairmont, West Virginia, which is where NOAA has their SOC. Interesting thing, NOAA is probably arguably 45-50% headcount-wise of all of the Department of Commerce, so it made a lot of sense for us to co-locate our security oversight center with NOAA, because then we've already got 45-50% of the organization that's right there next to us. So that made a lot of sense. And plus, from a shared services standpoint, we're going to leverage all of their contracts. We're going to leverage their site, all of that good stuff. So we're trying to do more with less in that regard, if we can. We'll see. We'll see how it works
It'd be nice
out.
to do less with less, wouldn't it? That's a loaded question. Let me turn to Chuck real quick. What about the workforce? Because I think that's one issue that doesn't get addressed enough. And one of the things that I heard recently from John Stroford at DHS and Alan Paller at SANS is, listen, you can have all the data you want, but if you don't have the people to understand the data and act on the data, then you still all you have is data.
Right. So we talk about this at the Government Advisory Board, and I'm the co-chair of, and it's one of the big issues that we talk about is who do we train, how do we train, where do we train, and what do we train. So within my own organization, one of the things that I've done, and I hate to say this, but I've poached people from the operations group. I've poached people from telecom services. I've poached people from legal. I'll poach anybody from anywhere. And if they understand the knowledge, if they've got solid business knowledge, and that's kind of what I look for today, if they've got solid business knowledge and analytical skills, I can probably leverage that person and make them a pretty solid security guy, girl, whichever. It's more of understanding what you see. And I think Rod said it earlier, was one of those things that you have to understand what you're looking at when you see it. Mm-hmm. If you can't recognize that that's a threat to a retail operation or to a delivery operation or to a biometric, a biodetection operation, if you can't recognize that, then all, for the most part, all the tools in the world aren't going to save you. So it's one of those things where we've got to train them on understanding the business first. We've got to help them understand how to analyze the threat and that the threat has viability within your organization. I think that's the key.
We're getting right up to the end here, so before I let you all go, I want to turn to you and ask about the takeaways. When people are listening to this, watching the webinar, what should people take away? Let me start on the other end of the table with Ken. Since you were the last one on the first round, you get the first one on the last round. When people think about CDM, what are one or two things that from your experience working with agencies, they really need to keep at the forefront?
There needs to be a concerted effort between leadership and the operating units to make sure that everybody's defining CDM and they have their eye on the same goal of the program. And then secondly, I'd like to key off on something that Melinda said, that CDM is going to take time before we get to phase 2 and phase 3. That's not going to stop the threats that phase 2 and phase 3 are protecting. So, if you can wait, go ahead, but don't not implement technology that is going to solve a critical need for you just because you're waiting for CDM, the next phase of CDM.
Melinda, from your perspective, what's you guys are a little bit ahead. Some people. What should other agencies really keep in mind around CDM?
I think the key is to really follow what is being rolled out, information. Make sure you put your requirements into the CDM program so that you're in queue for the next set of offerings. And again, I think every agency is different, so just be mindful of what's important for your environment. What do you need in your environment? And knowing what you need and then go to the CDM program to leverage the solutions that way rather than to try to just pick up everything that's being offered through that. I would say just be very specific in matching what you need versus what they have to offer. And again, back to what Ken said earlier, there are threats that are related to phases 2 and 3. I think you need to have a defense in depth approach. You need to make sure you have solutions at every point in the continuum, and where you can get the solutions for free, great. If not, don't wait.
Rod, Melinda talked about the grocery cart approach to pick shelf A and shelf B. What's your approach to CDM that people should take away?
Well, I think there's really two things. The first is that I'm looking in the near-term future, and I'm looking for some network tools, network abilities to be able to see what's traversing through the network and to be able to take care of those issues. But I also like the word resilience in John Struford's title, Federal Network Resilience, because the goal here is as we put these tools in place, to be able to be resilient and to be able to react to the malware incursions as they occur so that it doesn't bring us to our knees.
Chuck McGann, U.S. Postal Service, you get the last word.
I get the last word. Okay, so I think Rod's
two.
absolutely right, or two. So I think Rod's absolutely right. It's about resilience. We're going to be attacked. We know we're going to be attacked. That's the given. It's how well we recover from the attack, how fast we recognize the attack. Where do we go with that information? How do we recover our business model? How do we recover the trust? As most of us here at .gov's, how do we recover the trust of a .gov being hammered and held out there to dry? I mean, and I don't want to put VA out there, but VA still takes the stench, if you would, from what happened years ago, and they can't get rid of that, and it's unfortunate for them. And I'm not throwing them under the bus, but by any stretch of the imagination, could have been any of us. So the bottom line is, for me, taking away from CDM is not the be-all, end-all. You got to figure out what you need for yourselves. One of the things I expect to come out of it is commonality of terms. Is an event, and is an event an attack? Is it actionable? Is it not? So I think hopefully that will help. But again, don't wait for CDM if you have an issue. CDM is just a platform for you to buy a tool, handle your issues, as best you can. And if CDM works for you, as Melinda said, great, use it. If it doesn't work for you, maybe keep going. Keep looking.
All right, all good advice. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, Discussion of Progress and Next Steps, sponsored by Symantec on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. I'd like to thank our guests today for this great conversation. Rod Turk, the Director of the Office of Cybersecurity and Chief Information Security Officer at the Commerce Department. Chuck McGann, the Manager for Corporate Information Security at the U.S. Postal Service. Melinda Rogers, the Justice Department's Chief Information Security Officer. And Ken Durbin, Symantec's Continuous Monitoring Practice Manager. I'm your moderator, Jason Miller. If you miss any part of this program, visit federalnewsradio.com/Symantec.
On behalf of Symantec and Federal News Radio, thanks to the panel for this informative discussion. You'll be presented with some polling questions as you leave the webinar to help us improve future sessions. We appreciate your feedback. We'll have the archive from this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you for you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who requested a training certificate for this webinar should receive it in the next 2 weeks. Be sure to register for upcoming webinars from the Capital Exchange. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.